Greetings, friends. The Russians continue to carry out aerial terror against Ukraine. Last night they attacked Kharkiv again using guided aerial bombs and drones. Drones also attacked Chernivtsi. Unfortunately, there are both injured and dead there. Just last night, the Russians launched nearly 600 drones. Half of them were decoys and the other half were Shaheds. Lviv also came under attack. In Volyn in Lutsk, the Russians achieved a huge victory by destroying a residential building. The day before yesterday, the Russians also damaged a maternity hospital in Kharkiv. I told you about it.
Labirenko, here he is. And Vaskovets left. Oh.
And so the American president was asked what he thinks about such strikes, what he thinks about the attack on the maternity hospital, and Trump gave a mysterious answer.
Russian military drones tragically struck a maternity hospital in Ukraine late last night, causing significant damage. I know.
We'll see what happens next.
Already on Monday, we expect his statement regarding the Russian-Ukrainian war. He announced it, while cowardly Russian propagandists called the strike on the maternity hospital a strike on military infrastructure.
That's how he responded to the request to comment on the Russian strikes on Ukrainian military infrastructure. What is your reaction, they asked him, to Russia's strike on Ukraine?
Today we will talk in detail about Russian aerial terror, about the goals the occupiers are pursuing by carrying out massive drone attacks, as well as their strikes on the territorial recruitment centers. But first, I urge you to contribute to the fundraiser for the optical rosaries. It's almost complete, just a little more needs to be raised, so hurry up. All the details, as always, are in the description of this video. And for some reason, still only half of those who watch my videos are subscribed to the channel. This needs to be fixed, so please subscribe. In recent weeks, the enemy has significantly intensified air attacks on our country. At the same time, their tactics have changed. By the way, they actually borrowed these tactics from Ukraine's security and defense forces. The Russians are trying to send as many drones as possible to a single location in order to break through our air defenses. At the same time, the Russians deliberately choose not only military targets but also civilian ones. They strike residential buildings as well. And this is not a coincidence.
In this regard, we can say that these are, in part, humanitarian strikes. Because in doing so, we are saving the lives of hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians.
From a military standpoint, their objective is clear when they strike military targets. But when it comes to civilian targets, this needs to be explained. The Russians deliberately strike residential buildings and carry out massive attacks in order to exert psychological pressure on the civilian population in Ukraine, to make people lose hope, to encourage people to leave Ukraine more actively, and to undermine our economy as well as the overall moral and psychological state of the nation. Can we fight against this? We can, but it will take time. Unfortunately, Ukraine lost a lot of time preparing drone interceptor operators. But now the work has become active, and now almost every night drones are being shot down with the help of those interceptors for which you contributed your funds. Our partners are also allocating significant funds so that Ukraine can produce and purchase more drone interceptors. Therefore, with time, things really should get better. At the same time, we need to talk about Russian strikes on the territorial recruitment centers. Previously, the Russians used agents and carried out sabotage near the buildings of the territorial recruitment centers. But now they have started launching drone strikes. From a military standpoint, the logic behind these strikes is clear. The Russians need to disrupt mobilization in Ukraine so that Ukraine cannot defend itself. But here, above all, they are pursuing a psychological goal.
Look at the unity between Ukrainians and Russians that has emerged after our jeering strikes on the territorial recruitment centers.
With strikes on the territorial recruitment centers, the Russians are primarily conducting not so much a military operation, but rather a moral and psychological one against Ukrainians. To enhance the psychological effect, the Russians have also started signing shaheds supposedly on behalf of residents of Ukrainian cities. This image is especially ridiculous, where the inscription is supposedly from the residents of Odessa, written in Ukrainian, even though many Odessa residents, in fact the majority, do not speak Ukrainian. The goal of the Russians is to exploit the tension in Ukrainian society around the topic of the territorial recruitment centers, and use it to claim that the Russians are liberators.
Undoubtedly, this is one of Russia's most successful media campaigns in terms of communicating with the Ukrainian population. These sentiments need to be addressed, and the strikes with gerunds, this is one of it's not the only or some ultimate method, it's just one of the ways to work with these sentiments.
And for the same purpose, the Russians are also recording staged videos supposedly from Ukrainian Hungarians who allegedly demand to join Hungary precisely because of the territorial recruitment centers.
Based on this, the time has come for active measures.
We need to destroy the buildings of the territorial recruitment centers and the enemy administration. The time has come to fight for joining our historical homeland, Hungary.
And the question arises, how do we fight this Russian information psychological military attacks? Of course, we need more air defense systems, but that won't change the overall situation in this case. Mobilization cannot be popular in any country. Any state that has fought a war and carried out mobilization has faced public discontent. But let's be honest, in Ukraine mobilization is being carried out ineffectively, and some of the methods used during mobilization, though not everywhere, are unacceptable, and they do more harm than good, because, for example, a person who has been beaten will not become a motivated soldier afterwards. Therefore, the approaches and methods of mobilization need to be changed. But the problem is actually much broader. Ukraine needs a major military reform because even if a person is mobilized without any issues and has a high level of motivation, they might end up in a particular unit where they have an inadequate commander and there will be nothing they can do about it. This is a problem that also has a significant impact on mobilization. In order to deprive the Russians of any arguments for conducting such information and psychological operations, a comprehensive military reform is needed, one that will include introducing accountability for commanders for unjustified losses, changes in approaches to mobilization, and many other aspects. We will either change or we will perish. And if we do not change, what the Russians are saying could become reality. They are already mobilizing Ukrainians in the temporarily occupied territories, and in the future, if, God forbid, so-called Russia wins, they will mobilize people from other regions of ours as well and send them to fight for their own interests.
I wish Ukrainians would wake up sooner, because Ukrainians are a mobilization resource in the future war with NATO. Well, that's just objectively the case.
That's why the issue of army reform is without exaggeration a matter of our survival. And let these Russian strikes on the military enlistment offices push the higher military and political leadership of Ukraine toward real changes. And speaking of changes, but this time in the United States of America, after Trump began publicly criticizing Vladimir Putin, hysteria has erupted in so-called Russia.
Trump is threatening us. Well, you all understand, right? So maybe Biden was actually a bit better than this comrade Trump, Donald Fredovich.
At the official level, Russians keep saying how much they want to make peace with America, how they want to cooperate, but unofficially they call Americans stupid.
I just want to say that they're stupid, like our famous satirist Zadornov used to say back in the day. That's it. I don't see it any other way.
Just a week ago, according to Russian propagandists themselves, Americans were great friends to the Russians, and now Trump and his circle are terrorists.
They are currently resorting to acts of terrorism, and they are significantly raising the stakes just to genuinely scare us at this very moment in time.
You know, by the way, do you know how to tell if a Russian is lying? It's very simple. If they open their mouth, they're lying. So the masters of lying are outraged that the American administration is lying.
That is, they lie every day. They lie without shame. They don't apologize.
On Monday, Trump's special representative Keith Kellogg is expected to arrive in Ukraine, and he will stay with us for a whole week. On Monday, we are expecting some important statement from Donald Trump. I hope it will actually be important and not like it usually is. So in principle, there is some good news, but still, it's not worth relying on the United States of America. They can change their position at any moment. It's better to count on the Germans. They promise that by the end of July, the first deliveries of missiles jointly produced by Ukraine and Germany long-range missiles will arrive.
We need weapon systems that can penetrate deep into Russian territory, capable of striking depots, command centers, airfields, and aircraft. Germany is also fully prepared to provide such advanced weapon systems, and the Ukrainian armed forces will definitively receive their initial long-range weapon systems at the very end of this current month, with hundreds more additional units to follow subsequently.
Just kidding, of course. No, not about the missiles, but about having hopes for the Germans. The Germans are helping us, and they are good. But first and foremost, we should rely on ourselves, and we should support the security and defense forces of Ukraine. Let me remind you about our fundraiser for fiber optic FPVs. We really need your 2 hryvnias. All the payment details are in the description. Well, with your help, we continue to deliver drones to the Ukrainian military every day. And this is invaluable assistance. We supply both Shahed interceptors and anti-reconnaissance FPV air defense drones, as well as fiber optic drones and regular FPVs. Thanks to you, our soldiers received another 308 new FPVs in the past day. Glory to the heroes, friends! The Russians are unable to capture Ukraine through a ground offensive, so they will intensify their air attacks. Air terror, let's call it what it is. But we will have something to respond with. But for that, keep supporting the security and defense forces of Ukraine.